Hello, this is Brittany from Create With Me, and today I'm going to be going over how to apply pigments to silicone molds to get a variety of effects. So, shown here we have a multitude of pigments being used for different effects. Today we're going to be using a flake pigment that's been used here. We'll be using a fine hollow pigment as seen here. A flake hollow pigment, which gives a more scattered effect. A pearl pigment, such as this one. And a pearl pigment is simply a white pigment that has a color shift to it when applied over black or white. We'll also be using a brushed on neon, which is not pictured here, and a multichrome as well, which would be something like this. Shown here are the 6 pigments we'll be using: the large flake, the fine hollow, the flake hollow, the pearl, the neon, and the multichrome. To do this, you'll need your pigments, of course, brushes to apply your colors. You can use makeup brushes, paint brushes, you can even use little sponge applicators. These all work perfectly. And of course, you'll need some molds. Today I'm going to be using these awesome molds from Let's Resin because they're nice and big and it'll be easy to see the effect. So the first color we're going to be using is going to be this multichrome flake. Now the thing about using these is you want to be really careful with them. They're really light and thin, but they're also extremely messy. So once you get them inside your mold, you can see that it kind of just attaches itself on its own because of the static. These are made of metal, so I like to kind of like scoop the pigment in almost to get the best effect. Now, with the naked eye, you're not going to get like full coverage from these flakes, but you'll see that once you start buffing it, they do break apart and you will get full coverage, but you won't get full large flake coverage, but it's definitely completely covered on the inside, as you can see in there, even though there's small breaks that you can see from the outside, and it looks as if there's empty spaces, it's actually completely covered. And it doesn't take very much. It's one of the reasons I really like using flakes. So when you order some of these and it looks like quite a small amount, don't be alarmed in thinking that you're getting, bamboozled. You're really not. It doesn't take a large amount to do its job. And so it often does seem like you're paying too much for what you're getting, when in fact it goes quite a long way. And I will be, of course, putting links in the bio so you can see the exact products that I'm using. I like to get just a little bit at the end and go over everything one last time gently, just to completely make sure I am fully covering the mold. Try to get a good angle there. It's going to be really pretty when it's done. Next, we're going to be using our fine hollow flake, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, as it's a very popular pigment and has been for quite some time. It looks kind of plain in the jar. It looks like almost just like a slightly hollow gray fine glitter, but you'll find that once you apply it, you get a really nice hollow effect. And that's because it's so fine that once you lay it down and all the pieces are laying flat, it's able to show the full spectrum, which is really nice. This is probably one of my favorite pigments out there, just because I love rainbows and this shows every single color, so it easily has become a favorite and I like to use it often, especially highlighting on those little cats that I showed you earlier. I do love to do a hollow eyeball because I think it just adds some whimsy and some character to the little cats. Also, I can never get those freaking glass eyeballs to work. I always end up having to cut resin out of the edges. I don't know if that's like a common occurrence, but it's definitely common for me. Alright, and so with these crystal molds, whenever I'm using a brush like this, I do like to kind of twist it around to make sure I get into the little fine points. I've never had a problem so far with coverage, and I don't think I'm going to begin to. But just in case, I do like to twirl my brush around to make sure I'm really getting those edges. There you go. Next, we're going to be using our large hollow flake. Something I really like about this effect, as shown here, is that you don't need to cover the whole mold. You can leave some little black spots, and it gives us a really nice scattered effect, which is what I'll be doing with this. This one is not the same as your other flake pigments. It doesn't break apart. So what you see is what you get. So if you're trying to get full hollow coverage, I wouldn't really recommend this particular size of hollow flake. I would either go with fine or ultra fine. This is the coarse. So it's not going to be full coverage, but it's definitely gorgeous. Almost like a holographic mirror that got broken into pieces. There you go. You can see the scattered effect. It's going to be really nice over black. Next, we're going to be doing our Chameleon Pearl pigment. And the thing about these Chameleon Pearls is they always seem to look like they're just white with a hint of blue or a hint of purple, and you truly cannot see their color play potential in the jar. You cannot really judge based on what you see in the jar. You really have to see color samples, which is why I have a complete sample swatch of all of my my specialty pigments, and I have it labeled so that way if I'm looking for a particular effect, I can remember which jar it is, because by looking at the jar, you would never guess some of the colors that would come out of these. So definitely don't judge a pearl by its color. It's probably inaccurate by what you're just seeing. Even sometimes the pigments, like the Chameleon multichromes, you can see some of the color play in a jar, but until you have it on something with more bumps and texture, you can't really see the complete color play. Even sometimes when nail techs are using Chameleon pigments, you won't see every color that is possible on your nails because your nails are generally quite smooth. And you need something that can bend all the different angles so light can refract. So just keep that in mind when you're using a pearl, and make sure you're making samples of your colors so you can remember later. I probably have about 10 different Chameleon pearls, so it's really important for me to have samples. So right here you can sort of see a blue purple shimmer, but you won't really know until we do our black resin over that. Now we're going to be doing our neon green, and this one's a little bit different because I won't be doing this over a black base. This will be done over a white base, as the black just wouldn't really show up that well. It would fluoresce, but when wearing it out in a regular light setting, you wouldn't see it. This one's going to be super quick to do because this pigment is extremely fine. And of course you can always mix a neon pigment in with clear resin, and that'll work just fine, but if you're trying to conserve, or maybe you want a more pastel look, brushing it in the mold is great too. And it's still going to fluoresce. I think I'm going to tap out the excess pigment in here. And last but not least, we have our Multichrome Chameleon pigment, which has always been a fan favorite from what I understand, as the color play is pretty crazy looking. As I mentioned with our Flake pigment, these do seem a bit pricey when you're purchasing them, especially for the weight. Like, you'll pay like $10 for a half gram of these, which, you know, if you know anything about weights, it's not very much. In fact, it's very, very little. However, this pigment is so extremely fine that you need very, very, very little to cover an entire mold. In fact, that tiny little dip of the brush was more than enough to do the entire inside, and I actually have excess pigment on this. So I would say when you're buying these pigments, go ahead, unless you're doing something extremely large or very repetitive, buy the smaller amount, and if you find that you really like the pigment, then go ahead and buy something larger, just so you know how much you're generally going to use, because by judging at the small jar, you would think that you would get like maybe 1 or 2 uses out of it, but I've been using this jar for about a month now, and it's barely been touched. All right, and there you have it. Just to go over really quick which pigments we used. This was a Multichrome Flake, a Fine Hollow, a Flake Hollow, a Multichrome Pearl, a Neon, and a Multichrome Chameleon pigment. Alright, so here we are, it's the next day. You will notice that the backs of these have been finished off. Whenever it was about 12 hours into the curing process, I went ahead and took the same pigments and I brushed them with a brush over the mostly cured but just barely sticky backs of these. That way, when I make these into necklaces, it won't just be plain black. Alright, so we're going to demold them now. This is the Flake, the Multichrome Flake. You can see it's extremely reflective. It's one of the reasons you want to use shiny molds or silicone molds, because they just buff out really well when you're using pigments. It's really hard to show all the colors in this, but it goes blue, purple, yellow, orange, green. This one actually goes pretty much the whole color wheel. So there's that one. Now we have our ultra fine hollow. It's going to be super shiny. Whew. As you can see, that turned out excellent. And then we have our scattered hollow, which, oh my gosh, I love these. It's so pretty. So you can still see the black, but it's not like super apparent. Still extremely hollow, but definitely a different effect from the fine. And then we have our Pearl Chameleon. This is the one that I was saying that, you know, you can't really judge it based on the bottle. So you can tell this is like a bluish purple. Really subtle effect, but in sunlight it's a lot more dramatic. You can see it a little bit better whenever I block off some light. Then we have our Neon. I really like the way this effect came out because it's more of a pastel. Whenever you're using these and you're mixing them into the resin, you get a like semi-opaque or semi-transparent, but it's a lot more intense, and sometimes you don't want it to be this intense. And then last but not least, we have our Multichrome Chameleon, which is super shifty. Always one of my favorite colors to work with. And that's it. That's the different type of pigments I use on an almost daily basis. Thank you for watching this video. Bye!